The North Atlantic is a world of extremes, towering waves, howling winds, and endless darkness. Beneath its surface lies a legend. A colossal ship lost decades ago, swallowed by the sea, holding secrets and treasures frozen in time. Dr. Elias Hawthorne, an oceanic archaeologist, descends into the abyss in a state-of-the-art submersible. Equipped with piercing lights and robotic arms, he seeks not just treasure, but the stories of a ship long forgotten. The vessel was a marvel of its time, thousands of tons of steel, towering guns, and armor built to defy destruction. Rumors speak of personal effects, logbooks, and medals still intact, preserved by the cold, crushing depths. As Hawthorne approaches, shadows emerge from the blackness. The wreck is enormous, its hull scarred, turrets encrusted with marine life, and debris strangely arranged. Tiny bioluminescent creatures illuminate letters, tools, and trinkets. The Sunken Giant is more than steel, it is memory, a silent storyteller of ambition, loss, and the relentless power of the ocean. Beneath miles of water, it waits patiently, ready to reveal its secrets to anyone brave enough to listen. Hawthorne's submersible began its slow, deliberate plunge into the abyss, the sunlight above fading until the world he knew disappeared completely. Each passing meter brought heavier pressure, a silent reminder that the ocean held dominion here. Outside, the water darkened into an impenetrable black, a void where sound barely traveled, and every movement of the sub was amplified against the infinite silence. Strange shapes moved just beyond the reach of the lights, shadows in the darkness, hinting at life forms adapted to a world without sun. Tiny bioluminescent creatures shimmered like scattered stars, weaving through the water and illuminating glimpses of the seabed below. The ocean floor was a shifting landscape of sediment, ridges, and debris, silent witnesses to centuries of relentless currents. Hours passed, and then the first outlines of the ship emerged from the darkness. It was impossible to comprehend its scale. Massive hull plates twisted but intact, turrets rising like jagged mountains, and the structure stretching further than his lights could reach. The submersible hovered, surveying the frozen giant, while currents stirred small clouds of sand and silt, casting the wreck in an otherworldly glow. Debris surrounded the ship in unusual formations, not entirely. Random chunks of metal, fragments of machinery, and personal items seemingly positioned with a deliberate hand. Hawthorne's lights revealed waterlogged logbooks, rusted metals, engraved tools, and personal letters. Each artifact a fragment of life frozen beneath the waves. He imagined the crew who had once walked these decks, the routines they had followed, and the sudden violent moment that had ended their world. The deeper he descended, the more the wreck seemed to take on a life of its own. The submersible's lights caught glimmers of inscriptions etched into steel. Faint symbols carved long ago, hints of stories untold. The ocean was silent, but Hawthorne could almost feel the presence of the ship itself, a storyteller preserved in metal and time, patiently waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. By the time the submersible reached the seabed, the Sunken Giant dominated the view in all directions. Turrets, hulls, and scattered artifacts stretched across the ocean floor like the remains of a forgotten city. Hawthorne exhaled slowly, knowing that he was no longer simply observing a wreck, he was stepping into history itself. A monument to ambition, tragedy, and the enduring power of the deep. Hawthorne's lights cut through the abyss, revealing the full scale of the Sunken Giant. It was unlike anything he had imagined. The hull stretched farther than his eyes could follow, scarred and twisted but astonishingly intact. Turrets jutted upward like frozen sentinels, their massive barrels encrusted with coral incrustations. Rusted cables dangled from shattered decks, swaying gently with the silent currents, as if the ship itself were breathing in the darkness. As he maneuvered closer, the details became clearer. Decks bore the remnants of human life, waterlogged logbooks, brass compasses, and metals glinting faintly under his sub's lights. Photographs, faded and fragile, still clung to lockers and walls, capturing faces of crew members frozen in time. Each artifact told a story of ambition, duty, and ordinary lives suddenly interrupted by the ocean's unforgiving grip. Hawthorne felt a profound mix of awe and sorrow. These were not just objects, but fragments of human experience preserved in the cold silence of the deep. The arrangement of debris was unsettling. Machinery, hull plates, and personal items were scattered across the seabed, yet some areas suggested deliberate placement. Tools lined alongside metals, fragments of letters positioned near instruments, as if someone had tried to communicate across decades. Hawthorne traced lines with his robotic arm, feeling the eerie sense of intention behind the chaos. The wreck whispered secrets he could almost understand, but not yet fully grasp. Beyond the artifacts, the wreck itself told a story. Hull breaches suggested violent encounters, while bent railings and collapsed bulkheads hinted at the ship's final struggle. Sediment settled in patterns revealing the force of water and currents, yet the structure remained stubbornly intact. The giant had endured decades underwater, resisting time and pressure, yet yielding just enough evidence to allow a patient observer to reconstruct its history. Hovering in the submersible, Hawthorne was struck by the surreal beauty of the scene. Bioluminescent fish darted through openings, illuminating faded inscriptions on steel. Light reflected off rusted metal and scattered debris, creating an almost sacred atmosphere. The wreck was no longer just a ship. It had become a cathedral of memory, a monument to ambition, courage, and loss. For the first time, Hawthorne realized the enormity of what he had discovered. He was not merely observing a sunken ship. He was standing at the threshold of a frozen world, a repository of human stories, and a silent witness to the relentless power of the ocean. Every artifact, every shadow, every corroded surface held a secret, and he had only just begun to uncover them. As Hawthorne drifted through the wreckage, a strange pattern began to emerge. At first, he thought it was chance debris scattered by centuries of currents, but soon the arrangement of artifacts suggested intention. Hull plates, tools, and personal effects lay in formations that defied randomness. Metals were clustered near collapsed machinery, letters positioned alongside instruments, and fragments of logbooks aligned in ways that hinted at a deliberate design. It was as if the ship itself, or its crew in their final moments, had attempted to communicate across the void of time. The sub's lights illuminated inscriptions on steel and faint markings etched decades ago, almost imperceptible in the cold darkness. Hawthorne traced each line, feeling a thrill mixed with unease. These were not mere remnants of human life. They were clues, whispers of a story the ocean had preserved in the quiet geometry of wreckage. Was it a final act of defiance, a ritual, or simply the unconscious ordering of desperate hands? He could not tell, yet the patterns demanded attention, a narrative hidden in plain sight. Even the debris itself seemed to interact with the deep-sea environment. Sand shifted in slow, hypnotic waves, revealing more fragments and rearranging itself over time. Currents nudged artifacts into new alignments. Bioluminescent creatures illuminated hidden corners, casting fleeting light over letters, metals, and rusted tools. It was a delicate dance between destruction and preservation, chaos and order, where the ocean became both storyteller and archivist. Hawthorne's mind raced. Each discovery suggested lives interrupted, decisions made in desperation, and the haunting possibility that the final moments of the crew had been filled with intentional acts meant to survive memory itself. He imagined officers placing personal belongings in specific spots, aligning tools and records, hoping someone, someday, would piece together the story they had left behind. The deeper he ventured into the wreck, the more surreal the scene became. The patterns of debris created corridors, almost like paths guiding him through the giant's skeletal remains. Shadows of twisted steel and scattered artifacts painted a labyrinthine picture of tragedy and resilience. Every turn, every sweep of his lights revealed another fragment of life frozen in time. Hawthorne realized that the Sunken Giant was not merely a ship lost to the depths, it was a living archive, a cryptic monument preserving human ambition, courage, and mortality. The ocean had swallowed it whole, yet within the dark silence, it had created a story waiting to be read. And Hawthorne, suspended in this alien world, was beginning to understand that uncovering the ship meant decoding not only its structure, but the very human hearts that had once given it life. The deeper Hawthorne descended, the more the wreck revealed itself as a world apart, suspended between history and the alien landscape of the abyss. Above, sunlight had long since vanished, leaving only darkness so complete it seemed tangible. Pressure pressed in from every direction, a constant reminder that this was a domain not built for humans. Yet life thrived here, strange and luminous, weaving around the sunken giant as if it had been waiting for centuries to claim the ship as part of its domain. Bioluminescent creatures drifted past the submersible's lights, their bodies glowing like stars in an underwater void. Jellyfish pulsated with ethereal rhythm, illuminating twisted steel beams and shattered turrets. Schools of tiny luminous fish darted in and out of crevices, their flashes of light revealing fragments of human history caught between the bent plates of the giant. Even the smallest shrimp and crabs seemed to navigate the wreck as if guided by an invisible map. Skimming across corroded brass and rusted metal, exploring the artifacts left behind, Hawthorne maneuvered carefully through narrow passageways between collapsed decks and massive turrets, each sweep of light uncovering new evidence of lives once lived aboard the ship. Rusted tools, metals, compasses, and brass instruments glinted faintly under the sub's beams. Waterlogged letters, though faded and fragile, remained legible, their words preserved by the cold, crushing depths. It was a haunting juxtaposition. Delicate traces of human life surrounded by a wild alien ecosystem thriving in silence. The wreck itself had become a strange garden. Coral and sessile creatures claimed surfaces once polished and pristine, painting the steel in patterns of red, orange, and green. Currents stirred the seabed, shifting sediment in slow, hypnotic waves that revealed fragments of machinery and personal items previously hidden. Even planks and hull fragments, displaced centuries ago, seemed to drift in orchestrated choreography, forming pathways and clusters that guided Hawthorne's lights across the giant's skeletal remains. Among the artifacts, Hawthorne noticed patterns that suggested intent. Metals were clustered near instruments, letters lay beside tools, small personal belongings were aligned as if someone had tried to preserve memory in the chaos of the ship's final moments. The ocean had claimed the vessel, yet in its preservation and the life that now surrounded it, the ship had become both archive and storyteller. Hovering over the seabed, Hawthorne felt the scale of the sunken giant. Its turrets, deck plates, and broken superstructure extended in every direction, a testament to human ambition now entwined with the rhythms of the deep sea. The surrounding terrain was equally alien, ridges of sediment, shadowed valleys, and glowing organisms creating an otherworldly theater. The ship and its inhabitants of long ago were now inseparable from the ecosystem that had claimed it, a fusion of memory and life that spanned decades. In that moment, Hawthorne realized the wreck was more than a historical artifact. It was a monument to impermanence and resilience. Every artifact, every flicker of light, and every living creature weaving through its skeletal remains contributed to a story that transcended time. The sunken giant had become a living archive, a bridge between the human past and the deep sea present, offering whispers of ambition, tragedy, and enduring memory to anyone patient enough to listen. Hovering above the wreck, Hawthorne allowed his lights to sweep slowly across the scattered remnants of life, each artifact a frozen echo of the past. The sunken giant was no longer merely a ship, it had become a repository of human stories, preserved by the cold and pressure of the deep. Every item told a tale, and Hawthorne approached each one with reverence, as if touching them could bridge the decades lost to the ocean's embrace. Metals glinted faintly in the sub's beams, corroded yet resilient. Each spoke of valor, service, and personal achievement. Hawthorne imagined the hands that had earned them, the pride and the dreams tied to each small piece of metal. Nearby, brass compasses and instruments lay partially buried in silt, their precise markings hinting at the ship's mission and the meticulous care of those who had navigated treacherous waters. These were not merely tools, they were lifelines, extensions of human skill and determination. Letters, surprisingly well preserved, were fragile but legible. Hawthorne carefully maneuvered a robotic arm to gently lift a waterlogged envelope, its faded ink revealing brief messages to loved ones, farewells that had never been delivered. He could almost hear the voices of the crew in his mind. Laughter, whispered conversations, orders barked across decks, moments of fear and courage. The letters humanized the wreck, turning metal and rust into living history. Small personal items, pocket knives, harmonicas, photographs added texture to the story. A young sailor had tucked a photograph of his family into his locker. Another had engraved his initials into a brass tool. These details transformed the ship from a monument of engineering into a tapestry of human lives, ambitions, and losses. Each object was a window into a world abruptly interrupted, a life frozen in the depths. Hawthorne noted the placement of the artifacts carefully. Metals and tools seemed clustered deliberately. Letters aligned in patterns, almost like messages to the future. He pondered the intentions behind them. Were these arrangements accidental, the chaotic result of sinking in currents? Or had the crew, in their final hours, sought to preserve memory, to create a record for those who might one day uncover it? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Beyond the artifacts themselves, the wreck spoke through its scars. Bent railings, collapsed bulkheads, and ruptured hull plates told of violent encounters and desperate measures. Some areas suggested explosions, while others bore the marks of flooding and structural collapse. Together with the personal effects, the wreck narrated a story of tragedy and endurance, of human ambition meeting the unforgiving power of the sea. As Hawthorne documented each discovery, he understood the duality of the Sunken Giant. It was both a relic of human achievement and a cradle for the alien life that now called it home. Every artifact, every scrap of metal, every preserved letter connected past and present. Human and oceanic, memory and nature. In this silent, frozen world, the Sunken Giant was more than a ship, was a living chronicle of lives, ambition, and the inexorable passage of time, waiting for those willing to listen. As Hawthorne hovered above the wreck, he allowed himself a rare moment of stillness. The submersible lights illuminated the Sunken Giant in all its tragic grandeur. But it was not just the scale or engineering that struck him, it was the human story etched into every fragment. He realized that he was not merely observing history, he was walking among the echoes of lives interrupted, suspended in time and preserved by the cold, merciless deep. He thought of the crew, young men, officers, sailors each, with dreams, fears, and families waiting far above. Their routines, their duties, and their small personal rituals had all left traces on the decks and in lockers. A harmonica, carried perhaps to pass idle hours, lay rusted but intact. Medals of service and engraved knives bore silent witness to pride, skill, and personal achievement. Letters, waterlogged, yet legible, conveyed farewells, aspirations, and fragments of intimate human connection. Hawthorne read each carefully, feeling the weight of emotions that had traveled decades under miles of ocean. It was the juxtaposition of human fragility against the immense, indifferent ocean that left him reflective. Here was ambition and courage preserved in steel and artifact, yet the same ocean had claimed the lives of more than 2,000 men. It was a reminder that no matter the strength of human engineering, no matter the meticulous care and bravery, the sea remains unconquered, a force that reshapes history on its own terms. Hawthorne traced patterns among the debris and artifacts, noting how some items seemed deliberately placed. Metals were near instruments, letters aligned with tools, photographs tucked in corners. Could the crew have attempted to leave a message for the future, to preserve memory even as death approached? He imagined officers carefully arranging objects in their final moments, small acts of defiance against the inevitability of loss. The wreck was both tomb and archive, telling stories in a language of rust, debris, and preserved artifacts. Every observation reminded him that history is more than dates and battles. It is lives lived, moments of humanity, decisions made under pressure, and the fragile traces left behind. The Sunken Giant was a mirror reflecting both triumph and tragedy, human ambition, and the relentless force of nature. Hawthorne felt a deep connection not only to the crew he could never meet, but to the broader continuum of human history, ambition, and mortality. Hovering in the submersible, he recognized that the wreck had become a monument. Not just to a ship or a battle, but to memory itself. Each artifact, every shadowed corner, every flicker of bioluminescent life contributed to a silent narrative bridging past and present. The Sunken Giant was not merely steel and lost treasure, it was a story of courage, loss, and enduring human presence beneath the waves, waiting for those willing to witness and remember. As Hawthorne drifted deeper into the labyrinth of the Sunken Giant, His lights caught something unusual, a cluster of objects tucked into the shadows beneath a collapsed turret. At first glance, they appeared ordinary: tools, a few letters, and a scattered set of personal effects. But their arrangement was deliberate, too precise to be the result of sinking or currents. He felt a thrill of anticipation. The wreck, he realized, was still capable of surprise. Among the items was a small chest, rusted yet intact. Hawthorne maneuvered the sub's robotic arm carefully, brushing away sediment to reveal intricate engravings on its surface. The chest's lock had long corroded, allowing the contents to be visible: bundles of letters, maps, and a collection of small metallic devices that seemed out of place. These were not mere personal effects. They suggested careful planning, knowledge, and perhaps a secret mission embedded within the wreck's narrative. He examined the letters first. Many were formal, written to commanding officers or military contacts, detailing navigation routes, supply information, and operational orders. Others were intimate, private communications to families, filled with hope, worry, and fleeting moments of joy. The juxtaposition was stark: life and duty intertwined, recorded meticulously even as disaster approached. It became clear that the crew had not left the ship entirely unprepared. Some had attempted to preserve knowledge and memory, leaving a coded trail for the future. The maps were equally fascinating. Faded lines marked strategic locations, trade routes, and hidden supply caches. Hawthorne's mind raced. Were these remnants of an operational plan, or something more clandestine, a record meant to be discovered decades later? The ocean had swallowed the vessel, yet the crew's foresight had ensured fragments of their mission survived, quietly waiting beneath the abyss. Finally, the metallic devices intrigued him the most. Small, precise, and unlike anything else in the wreck. They hinted at advanced engineering or secret technologies preserved in miniature. Could they be navigation tools, encryption devices, or personal artifacts meant to secure memory beyond the ship? Each object raised questions, weaving a layer of mystery atop the already haunting scene. Hovering over the site, Hawthorne realized he was not merely cataloging artifacts. He was unraveling a narrative of foresight, courage, and subtle defiance. The Sunken Giant had become more than a wreck. It was a time capsule, a carefully arranged puzzle left by a crew determined to be remembered, to communicate across the decades. The ocean had claimed their lives, yet these hidden secrets revealed a persistence of intent, a human desire to leave traces even in the most unforgiving depths. Every artifact, every letter, and every hidden device deepened the story. The wreck was no longer simply a memorial of loss. It was a testament to ingenuity, foresight, and the enduring human will to be remembered, even when swallowed by the vast, merciless sea. As Hawthorne hovered above the Sunken Giant, a profound silence enveloped him. The ocean was a witness, an impartial observer of both human ambition and the inevitability of mortality. Every artifact, every shadowed corner, and every corroded surface spoke in a language older than words, a narrative etched by time, pressure, and the relentless currents of the deep. The wreck had become a monument not only to human endeavor, but to the ocean itself, silent chronicle of lives, choices, and consequences. The giant lay sprawled across the seabed like a frozen cathedral. Its turrets reached skyward, its hull scarred and twisted, yet surprisingly intact. Debris stretched in intricate patterns, hinting at intentional arrangements and the final acts of those who had lived aboard it. Hawthorne realized that the ocean had preserved more than steel and rust. It had preserved memory. Every metal, letter, and tool was a fragment of humanity echoing across decades, waiting for someone to witness it. Bioluminescent creatures wove through the wreck like ethereal guides, their soft light revealing intricate details of the ship and its contents. Schools of tiny fish darted through openings, illuminating letters and photographs with a fleeting glow. Sediment shifted slowly, uncovering artifacts long buried and rearranging others, as if the ocean itself were participating in a conversation between the past and present. Hawthorne felt as though he were entering a dialogue with both the crew and the sea, each discovery deepening his understanding of their intertwined story. The wreck scars told their own story. Bent railings, collapsed decks, and ruptured bulkheads spoke of chaos, violence, and final struggles. Yet amidst the destruction, life persisted, intertwining with the remnants of human history. Hawthorne marveled at this coexistence, how the ocean claimed preserved and transformed the wreck, turning it into an archive of memory and a haven for strange, otherworldly life. Hovering in the submersible, he reflected on the fragile balance between human ambition and nature's relentless power. The Sunken Giant was a reminder that even the most formidable creations could be humbled, yet they also left behind enduring traces of ingenuity, courage, and resilience. The artifacts, letters, and hidden devices were more than objects. They were testimonies of intent, glimpses into lives abruptly interrupted, yet consciously remembered. Hawthorne understood that the ocean, in its silent testimony, held a dual role. It was both destroyer and preserver, erasing life, yet conserving memory. The Sunken Giant was a bridge between worlds, the human past, and the deep-sea present. Every artifact, every shadow, and every flicker of bioluminescent light became part of a narrative that transcended time, a story of ambition, loss, courage, and endurance. In the darkness of the North Atlantic miles beneath the surface, the Sunken Giant remained steadfast, a silent sentinel. It spoke without words, offering insight into history, memory, and humanity. And Hawthorne, suspended in its alien realm, realized that he was not merely a witness. He had become part of its story, carrying its secrets back to the world above, to be remembered and honored. After hours hovering above the Sunken Giant, cataloging its artifacts and observing the life it had nurtured, Hawthorne knew it was time to ascend. Slowly, the submersible disengaged from the wreck, light sweeping one last time across its scarred turrets and skeletal decks. The giant lay silent beneath the abyss, a sleeping monument to human ambition, loss, and endurance. The realization weighed on him. These men and their ship had become inseparable from the ocean, their story preserved in a domain few would ever witness. As he rose through the darkness, the wreck receded, yet its presence remained palpable. Currents stirred the sediment, shifting artifacts slightly, as though the giant were breathing, alive in its own submerged world. Hawthorne reflected on the patterns of debris, the hidden devices, the metals, and letters O, deliberate traces left by the crew. They had sought to communicate across time, leaving fragments of memory embedded within the wreckage. Even in death, they had maintained control over their story, a silent defiance against the indifference of the deep. The bioluminescent glow of deep-sea life faded with altitude, replaced gradually by the dimming blue of the upper waters. Hawthorne thought of the juxtaposition, human fragility against the ocean's immense, unyielding power. The Sunken Giant had endured decades beneath crushing pressure, yet it remained remarkably preserved, a testament to both human engineering and nature's capacity to archive memory. It was a reminder that creation and destruction often coexist, intertwined in ways beyond human comprehension. He allowed himself a moment of introspection, considering the personal stories embedded within the wreck. Young sailors with dreams never realized, officers with duty-driven foresight, letters that would never reach their intended recipients, and objects that now existed as silent witnesses to history. The Sunken Giant was more than a ship lost to the sea. It was a chronicle of lives, courage, and impermanence. It spoke of ambition, tragedy, and the enduring desire to be remembered. As the submersible neared the surface, Hawthorne felt the emotional weight of the expedition settle over him. The ocean had revealed a world of unparalleled beauty, terror, and insight. The wreck had taught him that even in the vast, indifferent, deep human presence could leave enduring traces, stories that survive beyond mortality. Every artifact, every shadow, and every pattern of debris had contributed to a narrative larger than the individual. A collective memory suspended beneath the waves. Breaking through to the sunlight above, the North Atlantic stretched endlessly, its surface serene, betraying nothing of the depths below. Hawthorne looked back once, knowing the Sunken Giant would remain in silence, yet alive in memory and in the stories it would inspire. He carried with him not only data and photographs, but a profound understanding. Beneath the crushing pressure of the deep, history sleeps, preserved and waiting for those willing to see, to listen, and to remember.